Hi, Chuck Rogers, Windhurst Counseling Center. I'm going to spend the next few minutes with you talking about how to repair relationships. One of the things that you want and one of the things that I want is to be able to have emotional relational intimacy. What you don't want is emotional relational distance. And because this comes upon you and because this comes upon me, what is it that you have to do about that? The things that I'm going to share with you now are just some wonderful things that I've come across in my life. And I just really can't begin to imagine doing my professional life without it, and I really can't even begin to imagine doing my personal life without it as well. Because about 50% of all first-time marriages end in divorce, and just about everybody's relationship will tell you that about all first-time marriages end in divorce. Some research will say as high as 66 to 67% of all first-time marriages end in divorce, but about everybody's relationship, for the most part, will agree that about 50% of all first-time marriages do end in divorce. Thus, so what are you going to do about that? While 50% of marriages end in divorce is not good, that means that about 50% of all first-time marriages do stay together, and they do work. And granted, not all of those 50% are staying together and are happy about it. There are some people who are just staying together because they believe it's the right thing to do. They believe that I said I do, and I'm going to keep my commitment. Sometimes they just are going to stay together because they have children, whether it's younger children or adult children, and don't want the demise of that relationship to affect those loved ones. Sometimes it's for spiritual reasons. People believe it's just simply wrong to divorce. So for whatever reason, those folks just believe that they should continue to survive in their relationship rather than thrive in their relationship, and they just choose to stay together. However, of those 50% who do stay together, there is a subset of those folks who report happiness in the relationship. And those are the people that I'm going to spend the rest of my time talking with you about today. In fact, the information, the outline that I'm going to share with you today is not from my personal research at all. It's just information that I have borrowed from a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Gottman. I would encourage you to visit Dr. Gottman's website. It's gottman.com. Check out the information that they have, purchase their materials, go through my website. We have some links to their website as well, and avail yourself to all of the research that they have. It's wonderful material, and I believe it will be helpful for you. But Dr. Gottman became very interested, he and his research team, in regard to that subset of people who not just survive in their relationship, but actually thrive in their relationship, and he calls them masters. And he separates couples into two camps. He calls them the masters and the disasters. Watch them, listen to them. And then they did super cool research that most of us just don't have the ability to do. They took these happy couples and they put them into apartments. And in every room, with the exception of bedroom and bathroom, there was a camera and a microphone. And other than what was taking place in those rooms, everything was recorded. Every word, every volume, every inflection, every tone, every behavior was recorded. And then he said they had the very laborious task of going back and watching this stuff. And his words were, this stuff would be on the cutting room floor in Hollywood, because it was just normal life, and for the most part, normal life is really quite boring. I mean, they were catching things like somebody's cutting a sandwich, and they would say, do you want mayonnaise on your sandwich? They would say, no, I like the spicy mustard on the ham, but I like the mayonnaise on the turkey. Oh, great, yeah. Did you see what I did with that section of the newspaper? Oh, it's over there on the table. Thank you for pointing that out for me. Those were the kinds of interactions that they were finding. And then he said they went back through it and began to catalog the behaviors, and they began to catalog the words that they found. And something very interesting happened at that point. There were 4 things that began to arise, and those 4 things continued to be duplicated over and over and over again in the lives of the masters. The inverse, or the opposite of those 4 things, happened to take place over and over and over again in the lives of the disasters. And he calls those 4 things the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, because when you hear the hoofbeats of those 4 things, the end is soon to come. So I was really excited about that, because I don't consider myself to be the sharpest tool in the drawer, but I do believe that I can learn 4 things, and I can duplicate those 4 things over and over and over again in my own personal relationships. And so I'm going to spend the rest of my time talking to you about those 4 things. Now, You may choose to not do one of those 4 things. You may choose not to do any of those 4 things. But I do guarantee you that if you consistently, in your personal relationships, do those 4 things over and over and over again, you can't have a bad outcome. So let's start talking about those things right now. So I took Dr. Gottman's research, some of it anyway, and put it on the back of a business card. I'm sure he'd be very impressed to know that I collapsed his research to the back of a business card. But I put it into acrostic form so that I could use it and so that other people could use it as well. And I tell these folks to put this in your pocket, put it on in your purse, put it on your refrigerator, whatever you have to do. When you start having conflict with someone, go get this out and begin to work your way through it. So that's what we're going to start talking about right now. What I like to say is that the masters really know how to dance. So let's look at D. D means directly turn toward as opposed to turn away. Directly turn toward as opposed to turn away. What you want and what I want is emotional relational intimacy. What neither of us want is emotional and relational distance. Thus, so when this comes upon you, somebody in the relationship has to turn toward the other one. Somebody in the relationship has to turn toward the other one. Notice I did not say that some bodies have to turn. It's not necessary. Only one person has to turn. Now, it's just really super cool and wonderful when both people decide to turn at the same time, but it's not necessary. However, some couples get so good at this, and they love this so much, and they hate this so much, that they're both already starting to turn toward one another, even in the middle of a fight or an argument. Now, let me point out that if you're not careful, you'll miss a turn toward. It will go by and you won't even notice that it's happened. Let me give you some examples. Let's say that a couple is in their kitchen and it's late afternoon, getting into early evening, and a fight breaks out. And it's not going well. As a matter of fact, it's going very poorly, and they both know where it's going to end up because they've been there so many times. And let's say that the husband in this case says, hey, I'm out of here. I'm going for a walk. Be back in 30 minutes. Or I'm going for a drive. Be back in 30 minutes. And if you're going to leave, that's wonderful. Just make sure that the other person knows where you're going to go, what you're going to do, and when you're going to be home. And let's just say that he does it really right. He says, I'm going for a walk, be back in 30 minutes. And she says, fine, go ahead and go. So he leaves. And as he's gone, she begins to settle in. And then the evening is passing, and so she's thinking, well, I guess maybe I should begin meal preparations. And so she begins to fix something for them to eat. And then he comes home after a half an hour, and he walks in, and she looks up and she says, hey. And he says, hey. And she says, got dinner going. I've got steaks on the grill. And he says, yeah, I know. Smells good. And she says, would you like some salad with your steak? And he says, yeah, salad sounds good, thanks. Now, that was a turn toward. It had nothing to do with meat. It had nothing to do with lettuce. But it had everything to do, in this case, with him beginning to, actually with her, beginning to turn toward to begin some facilitation of repair. And while the words weren't specifically stated, there was some information that went between the lines, and it probably went something like this. Hey, glad you're home. Hey, good to be home. Got dinner going, got some steaks on the grill. Sure hate what happened. Yeah, I know. Smells good. I hate what happened too. Would you like some salad with your steak? I think I can probably do a better job. Yeah, salad sounds good, thanks. I'm very sure that I can do a better job. Again, nothing to do with meat, nothing to do with lettuce, but it had everything with her beginning to turn toward to begin a facilitation of repair. Not repair, but somebody in the relationship has got to turn toward the other one to begin that facilitation of repair. I was working with a couple many years ago. They came in, it was kind of a case where there was emotional, relational CPR on the relationship. I'd pump a little life back into it every time that they would come in, but they stayed with it. At times he'd work hard, at times she'd work hard, at times both would work hard, at times nobody would work hard, but they stayed with it and got some traction under their belt. And it kind of began to go toward that intimate, place of intimacy they both really wanted. And then all of a sudden something happened. I lost track of them. I think one of them was sick. I think another time they had a sick child, and it dropped off my calendar. But I was thinking about them intermittently, and I happened to be at my office, and I happened to be near a phone when I was thinking about them, so I called, and I called their home. She was home. And I just said, hey, it's Chuck. I was just wanted to check on you to see how you guys were doing. And she says, oh, Chuck, it's so good to hear from you. And I said, really, I was just calling to check to see how you were doing. And she responds in this way. She says, good. And I said, what's happening? And she says, no, we're actually doing very well. Your call caught me off guard, and your question caught me off guard, and I was just thinking about it because just yesterday we had a fight. And we were in the bedroom, we were in the morning, it was in the morning, and it was not going well, and he stomped off to the basement. And I didn't know what to do, so I just kept, making the bed and fixing up. And she said about 3 minutes later, he came up the stairs. It was kind of a and stopped in the doorway. And I remember I had the comforter in my hand, pulling it up, and I looked up, and he says to me, I don't think I liked the way I said that. And then she said, I don't think I liked it either. And then she said to me, Chuck, remember when it took 3 days to do that? I said, I do. And she said, 3 days to 3 minutes, I think that is success. And I said, I agree. We talked on for a few moments, and then officially agreed to call things off, although essentially the door always remained open to come back, though they never did. But that was one of the things that they learned to do, was to be able to turn toward in the relationship so that they could begin to facilitate repair. So that was D, directly turn toward as opposed to turn away. The second piece is A on the dance card, accepting of your partner's influence as opposed to being defensive. Accepting of your partner's influence as opposed to being defensive. Now, I have to admit that my natural instinctive response is when my wife Kim comes to me and gives her concern or her complaint, and I'll talk to you about that in just a moment. My natural instinctive response is to find a way to somehow shoot holes in the darkness for her and to prove how right I am and to prove how wrong she is about that. But I've got to somehow, if I want intimacy in my relationship, find a way to receive her influence. Now, I'm going to throw something to you, and I don't expect you to buy into it right now, because it was really difficult for me to buy in to begin with. When your spouse comes to you and makes their concern known, voices their complaint about what you're doing, what you're saying, or what you look like, or what you sound like, they're voicing their concern, he or she is really right about that. I know it's tough to take, and I had a hard time accepting that one too, because when I first heard about it, I was, chewing on it, and I thought, that just can't be right, because Kim is like so wrong about so many things, that just can't be true. Nevertheless, because I work with so many couples, and because I want them to have great relationships, and I want great relationship, I was thinking, well, I'll go ahead and try this. So I began to assimilate this piece into my own relationship. And so actually it kind of started like this, not really proud of it, but this is the way it started. I thought, well, she's not a jerk and she's not stupid, so there's got to be at least a grain of truth in what it is that she's saying. And so I'll work really hard and find that grain of truth in what she's trying to tell me. So she would bring her concern to me, and I would find that piece of truth in what she was saying, and I would find a way to agree with that grain of truth, only to realize that I was not agreeing with the grain of truth. I was agreeing with the tip of the iceberg, and that later on what I realized that the truth was underneath, and that she was really right about that. So I kind of gave myself a break and just started agreeing with what she was coming to me about, because she was really right about that. So it's accepting of your partner's influence as opposed to being defensive. Typically it kind of looks like this when your spouse comes to you and says, this is what's happening. You say, no, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. Or, well, yeah, I do that, but you do it more. Or I do that, but why do you think I do that? Or I do that, but I can't believe that you're beginning to bring this up after what you did last week, last month, or last year. All some form of defensiveness. Your only responsibility is to receive what it is that they have to say. And sometimes, however, it's so very difficult to be able to agree with what your spouse is saying. So we'll talk about attitude in just a moment. But if you can say it to your spouse in this way, "Hun, you know, I so want to be present for you right now, but I'm having such a hard time tracking with you about what you're saying. Nevertheless, you're so important to me. Nevertheless, our relationship is so important that I really do desire to be influenced by you. Share more with me about that." So that's A, accepting of your partner's influence as opposed to being defensive. N stands for nurturing your partner as opposed to having contempt. Being nurturing of your spouse as opposed to contemptuousness. Dr. Gottman talks about how it is that in relationships that are even able to measure when one spouse has contempt for another. He says that the jaw will become taut, and I can't remember the name of the muscle, but the jaw becomes taut and a dimple is created. Or another way that they can measure contempt is that the person will kind of do an eye roll. Or if there's a lot of contempt, oftentimes there will be a jaw pull, eye roll connection with a kind of a thing going on. Contempt is like this internal disdain that you have for your partner. An internal disdain that you have for your partner. And now they can measure it. And if they can measure it, you know your spouse or significant other is able to really pick up on what's going on. I was trying to determine how it is that contempt can really be explained. And I think it really it's a cousin to the word attitude. It's easy, really, to tell when somebody has a good attitude and when somebody has a really bad attitude. You can walk into the room and you can tell it. Also, what you know that you want to be around the person with a good attitude, and what you don't want is to be around the person who has a really bad attitude. I spent most of my professional career working in a hospital setting, and there were a certain group of people that I loved to work with because they had really great attitudes. And there were a group of people that I really didn't want to work with very much at all because their attitudes were so horrible. And I started thinking about how it was that I really treated each of them very differently. Now it's computerized there, but at one time there was a way that they would keep track of sickness. If somebody called in sick, you had to fill out what was called a green sheet. It was a 8.5 by 11 piece of typing paper that was a half of a sheet, and when they called in, you would name it, date it, check their symptoms, sign it, date it, tear it off, turn it in. And they would get paid for their sick time, and they wouldn't get counted absent. So I started thinking about how I started treating these people differently based upon whether I liked their attitude or not. Let's say that somebody that has a good attitude calls in. I would say, "Adult psychiatry, this is Chuck." "Oh, you're sick, I'm so sorry." "All right, hold on. Name, date, what are your symptoms? Check, check, check. Sign it, date it, tear it off, turn it in." And I would say, "Take care of yourself, come back when you can." And I'd be done. Now, I'm sorry that she's sick today, but my day's not going to be as good because she's part of the A-team. The A-team's not here today. And then when somebody would call in who was not part of the A-team, who didn't have a good attitude, it would be, "Adult psychiatry, this is Chuck." "Oh, you're not feeling well? I'm so sorry. All right, hold on. Name, date, what are your symptoms? Check, check, check. Sign it, date, tear it off, turn it in. All right, take care of yourself. Come back when you can." I would hang up the phone, and I would think, "Oh, I feel bad for her that she's sick and not coming in, but my day is just going to be better because she's not here." That's that whole piece of attitude. And that's what contemptuousness is that when you have this attitude, this internal disdain for your partner. Now, I had been working on these things as I was learning them many years ago because I, again, want to be able to help couples, and also I want a great relationship, and I was kind of evaluating myself as I go through. And I came to, the first one, D, directly turn toward as opposed to turn away. I do that very quickly because I love this and I hate this, so I turn very quickly. But I knew that I needed to kind of mend my approach because my wife, at least at that time in our relationship, was more of a slow turn than I was. And so what I would do is I would turn toward and just pursue her and almost chase her away. So I knew I needed to continue to turn toward, but just wait for her to turn back toward me. Accepting of Kim's influence as opposed to being defensive, unquestionably, I needed to do this better. I could be very defensive, although sometimes it was subtle, but it was still, I would give reasons, I would explain, I would try to make sure that she understood where I was coming from, as opposed to just receiving her influence. And so I needed to do that one a lot better. Then I got to this one, being nurturing as opposed to having contempt. I got this down. I love her. I think she's wonderful. There's no way that I have contempt for her. And then one day we were in our current home where we live, and in our kitchen, and we were having one of these times where it was a kind of a scraping going on. And I remember her back was toward the basement steps, and I was facing her, and she was going on, and in my mind she was like blithering on about something that was very important to her. And I'm giving good head nods and good gestures, as any counselor husband should. And on the inside I'm thinking, and I just can't wait till you shut your pie hole, because this is just stupid. And as I continued to be there, she eventually finished. Then I started to walk away, and as I did one of these numbers. And right away I was like gripped, because I knew I had contempt for her. But I wanted to be defensive with myself, and I keep a can of denial salve right here on my hip, and I reached in and I got some and just put it on my heart, and it made myself feel better at the time and think, well, you know, you don't really have contempt for her, you had contempt for her idea. And then I thought, no, Kim is her ideas are her. You really can't have contempt for her ideas and not have contempt for her. But I still wasn't done being defensive with myself. I reached into my denial salve and got another handful and rubbed it on my heart and said, well, you know, you do have contempt for her, but you were super good about it. You know, there was no way that she could see that eye roll. There was no way that she could see that jaw pull. There's no way that she could pick up on that. And then I had to get really real with myself, and I had to say, you know, do you think that little of her? Do you think her as being that small, that she's such an idiot that she can't pick up on when you have contempt for her? No, you do have contempt for her. It's affecting her. It's affecting your relationship. So that's N, being nurturing as opposed to having contempt. Let's move on to C, being able to give your concern in a way that can be heard. Actually, Dr. Gottman calls it being able to give your complaint in a way that can be heard, but I think the word complaint is rather harsh, so I encourage my couples to give concerns in a way that can be heard. First of all, you need to give it. And when you do give it, what does it sound like? Are you harsh? Are you judgmental? Are you a yeller and a screamer? What kind of tones do you use? What kind of gestures do you use? Do you use open hand gestures? Do you use fist gestures? Are you a pointer? And probably you're totally unaware of what you look like and what you sound like. So the only thing that you really can do is use the other person as a mirror and say, I really need for you to give me feedback on what I look like and what I sound like. That's the only way that we really are going to know about that. So not only do we need to be careful about what we look like and what we sound like, but the other piece of this is that you've got to give your concern in a way that can be heard, and you've really got to give it. In the relationship, you and I both are going to be wounded from time to time. The other person's going to say something that hurts us. The other person's going to say something that causes us to feel angry, and you've got to go give your concern to that person. What I tell my couples is, you don't have a right to give your concern to your spouse. You have a responsibility to do that. You don't have a right to do it. You've got a responsibility to your spouse and to the relationship. And oftentimes what happens, especially after couples come in and we start going places, they start getting traction in a relationship and really start moving toward that place of intimacy. It just feels so good. And then somewhere along the way, inevitably, there's a rub and a scrape, and somebody says something and somebody does something that is wounding. And this person really wants to say something and knows that they should say something back, but their fear button just gets pushed. They're thinking, no, we're going in the right direction, and I really hate where we were. I love where we are now. I love where we're going, and so, you know, I'm just not going to say anything. And I think for the most part, it's a very well-intended gesture, and so they kind of gunny sack that one away and just store it. A few days will go by, and somebody will say something, somebody will do something, and that person gets just wounded again, and so they're thinking, I really should, you know, turn toward and say something to my spouse, but, you know, I love where we are right now, and I love where we're going, and I so don't want to lose the momentum that we have built up, and so I'll just kind of gunny sack that one away. And then they continue this behavior, oftentimes very well-intended, wanting to preserve the peace that they have. And what will eventually happen is that this intimacy then will either just explode, or the intimacy will then just erode. It will either explode or it will erode, one of those two things, both ending in distance. So C, you've got to be able to give your concern in a way that be heard. It's not your right to give it, it's your responsibility to the relationship. And the final one is that of E, is emotional and relational joining at the heart during conflict. So let me back up for just a moment. It was D, A, N, and C. These are the four things that they learn from these people over and over and over again. And when people do it, they tend to do well. When they don't do it, they tend to have the distance that they don't want. And so your only responsibility is to do those four things over and over and over again. And this is what they learn from the masters. And when you do those things, something very interesting happens. This E pops out, which is an emotional, relational, and joining at the heart during conflict. Gottman says couples who have this do well. Couples who don't have it either simply survive in the relationship or either end in divorce. And he kept talking about this over and over and over again, how this is the thing that keeps couples together. And I kept going over it and over it and over it, and it just wasn't clicking for me. And I was just super bummed about this, because the guy who's done research on coupling more than anybody in the world says this is the thing that keeps couples together, and yet I wasn't getting it. What was I going to do? I was really bummed about this, and Kim, my wife, picked up on it, and I'd been kind of sharing things with her throughout as I was learning this material. And so she said, "What's wrong?" And so I told her, and she says, "Oh, yeah." I said, "Oh, yeah, what?" And she says, "Oh, yeah, he is so right about that." And I said, "You get this?" And she says, "Oh, absolutely." And I said, "Well, please explain it to me." And so she says, "Okay, we've been married for 16 years at that point." And she says, "Well, the first couple of years that we were married, I just knew that we were going to get a divorce." And I said, "Honey, I had no idea." And she says, "It's not like that now, but those first 2 years, I just knew that we weren't going to be able to stay together." I'm just looking at her, and she says, "Well, again, it's not like that now, but I just knew that we weren't going to make it. For you'd be angry, and I would just hate it when you were mad. And then because you're mad, it meant you didn't love me. And because you didn't love me anymore, I just knew we weren't going to be able to stay together." And I just continued to look at her. And she says, "Please understand, it's not like that now. I still hate it when you're mad. But even when you're mad, I know that you still love me. And because you still love me, I know you're not going anywhere." And she said, "That's what he's talking about." And I think he's really right, because it's easy to have emotional relational distance, it's easy to have emotional relational intimacy when things are good. But the trick is to be able to have emotional relational intimacy when there's a scraping that takes place in the relationship. Now, what I can't tell you is I want you to go home and create E. Go home and create emotional relational intimacy, this connection at the heart during conflict. I can't tell you to go create that. That would be the equivalent of me telling you, I want you to go home and create a tomato. You can't do it. What you can take is a tomato seed or a tomato slip, a little plant, go home, put it in some soil, give it some water, give it some right sunlight, maybe some fertilizer, maybe a little bug spray, some tender loving care. And as you continue to do that and tend it, this tomato plant grows, and eventually a blossom forms. And then that blossom then becomes a tomato, and then you can reach out and you can pick that fruit. Now, you didn't create that tomato at all, but you created everything around it that allowed that tomato to grow, and then you can enjoy the fruit. In the same way, there's no way at all that you can create emotional and relational and joining connection at the heart during conflict. It just can't be done. But what you can do is create the environment, everything around it, so that it grows. You can consistently D, A, N, and C, D, A, N, and C. And when you do that, something interesting is that the E just automatically pops up.